Welcome to another Grime basketball podcast, but this one's a special one. We will be discussing the Untold, the Malice and the Palace documentary, which you can find on Netflix. This is not an ad, but we have all watched it. I assume we all enjoyed it, but we will be talking about it throughout this episode. With me, Thomas Arnold.
Hey.
Michael Downey.
All right.
And Jose Garcia Vidal.
Hola.
And I'm your host, as always, David Sago. We're going to begin at the beginning of the doc. So it pans around what I believe is... I couldn't even get this. To me, it would make more sense if they were panning around Detroit, but they kept showing Indiana jerseys. So I'm going to assume they were in Indiana, showing Indiana suburbia. And they start out by talking a bit about the city and a bit about the team. The team had just come off a finals loss to you-know-who, Lake Show, baby. Kobe's coming out party. Shaq fouls out. Kobe brings the game home in overtime. And then they decide they want to get younger. So they start building a new team around Reggie Miller. The old team had been to the conference finals against Jordan's Bulls in 98, was that?
98, yes.
And they
right.
pushed them to 6 games. They were up 2-0 or 2-1. And then, they pushed it to 7 games, sorry. And then they had gotten to the finals in 2000 against the Lakers. Obviously, star Reggie Miller was there. And they wanted to keep him, but get younger, more athletic, and better defensively around him. So they traded Dale Davis, their starting center, for Jermaine O'Neal, who happens to be one of the executive producers on this project. So it's a very Jermaine-centric view, especially early on of the doc. It shows him getting drafted, shows him playing in Portland. Well, not playing in Portland.
Not playing.
Yeah, and then getting this trade to finally start and get to play a bunch of minutes in the NBA. They didn't mention it, but he would go on to win the MIP award. I think. Yeah, I think he wins the MIP award.
I mean, it would make sense, like the jump that he made.
Yeah,
he got to all-star level, so that makes sense.
Yeah, he was even an MVP candidate in 03-04. After that, GM Donnie Walsh trades for Ron Artest, what is he known as now? Ron World Peace? I don't know. Meta Artest.
Yeah.
I was quite confused about that because they refer to him throughout the document just as Ron Artest.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's sort of swapped back to going by that now, or if it was just
I think he's not too bothered, man. Like,
yeah,
like,
it's cool. Ron's all right.
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. And then they get him on board, sign him from Chicago. And then I think after the block on Reggie Miller by Tayshaun Prince in 04, the Detroit Pistons go on to win a championship over, you guessed it, my Los Angeles Lakers. And
Karl Malone's Los Angeles Lakers, really.
Karl Malone was on one leg. It's the reason we lost, damn it.
Still top scorer in the finals, I think, wasn't he?
No, it was Shaq.
No, it must have been Shaq.
It was Shaq. Karl Malone was very injured. No, other way around.
Right.
Karl Malone was very, very injured.
Right.
And the Pacers then retooled by bringing in Steven Jackson, and he was the missing piece, or at least that's how they felt. That's how it's portrayed in the documentary, right? That he was another hard-nosed player, had won a championship with the Spurs, another talented wing defender.
He wins it the next year.
Really? I thought he won the 03.
He wins it in 205 or 207 with Spurs.
Oh, okay. Yeah, maybe he wins it in 07. I thought he
07
won the
state.
03 ring. Why did I think that?
No,
But you're
no.
probably, I mean, you're the Spurs fan. You would know better than I would.
Oh, sorry, my bad. You're right.
Let's hear it. Let's hear it, San Antonio Nation.
Wow.
Fans back in the stands, baby. I'm a hip hop historian like LeBron. So yeah, he had won a ring in 03 with the Spurs, and added his pedigree to the team, and they felt like they were now the best team in the league. They had the best regular season record the year before, but as we said, lost in the Eastern Conference Finals, and then retooled, upgraded, and they were ready to win the whole thing. They knew they had the talent already, and they'd only gotten better.
And it was like mentality wise as well, that the guys that they had were all like really, they just wanted to win. Like that's what really came about Jermaine O'Neal in this, because I'd not really heard him speak that much, to be honest, before, but just his like sort of his desire to win. And like it was like, I don't care about own personal glory, it is team winning that is the number one goal. And sort of having Reggie Miller as your one guy that you're learning from on that is incredible to have. He's mentality wise, he's one of the guys that's like right up there, right? And then bringing in Jack and Ron Artest is just
it was
great setup.
It's funny actually to think that the way that they retooled, bringing in Stack Jack, like already to the team with the best record in the league. I don't remember thinking that at the time, but
yeah, me neither.
I totally understand why they thought they were the best team in the league.
I agree, and it's just crazy. At the time, I don't remember regarding them that high. You know, it was like the Pacers, sure, you know, but the Pistons just won the East, and we have to remember that in the 2000s, especially in the early 2000s, we're talking 2000 to 2005, 6, the East was dominated by the West by far. By far, you could see it in the All-Star game. You see it in the regular season. In the playoffs, it was always whichever team wins the West wins the championship. And the Pistons, you know, Bad Boys 2.0 win it. You know, but
they
then
were
it was
problem.
like Indiana, like absolutely. So I don't even remember thinking like Jermaine O'Neal, like, okay, you know, good player, but I wouldn't pick him for my NBA Live, you know, teams. Like I was like Jermaine O'Neal, like,
and I think the reason why I'm glad we're having this discussion as well, because the reason why that was because like the power forward position, the center adjacent position was stacked, completely stacked, and for you to think about him as one of the best players in the league, you had to go through Shaq, through Tim Duncan, through Kevin Garnett, through Chris Webber.
Nowitzki.
Like there was Nowitzki. There was all these players that played in the same or similar position to him
in the West
that were more talented.
And they were in the West.
Right? And they were in the West. They were all in the West.
Yeah, absolutely. Rashid Wallace was important at first, and then he moved to Detroit, you know, but it was all like these massive dudes, and they were all in the West. Absolutely.
Yeah, but he did finish, I think, third in MVP voting in 04, in that year before when they did have the best record. Like, I think a lot of people forget that they had the best record as well. They think it was Kevin Garnett's Timberwolves, but it was the Pacers.
They were really good, but I think that this season that they were going into was really like their biggest chance. They got to the finals against the Eastern Finals against Detroit, but I always felt like it was Detroit that were the big favorites in that still. They just had that team that was just immense. But we've had that experience. We found out what we're missing. We've got Stack in there now, and they were going for it. I think they made out, like in the documentary, and obviously they are the players that it was theirs, it was already written there and stuff
Yeah.
like that. But it wasn't quite like that, maybe.
No.
But they were good. They were really good.
Yeah, I think that's a more accurate depiction.
Mm.
And then so yeah, the season starts. I think they said they had an 8-2 record to start the year, or 9-2, 8-2, or 9-2.
7-2 is what they said on the
Okay.
interview. Yeah, something like that. I mean, they were well above average.
Yeah. I think they said it was the best record in the league at the time.
Mm.
And then they come into Auburn Hills, the Palace. And this is where I would like to take a little detour and talk about the way that they started to frame certain people in the documentary, because they mentioned Ron Artest in his album and Ron Artest in his antics.
Mhm.
And I had kind of forgotten some of it. And it's funny, when they mentioned Chicago, the first thing I thought of when they mentioned Chicago and Ron Artest being in Chicago was reading about him playing drunk in Chicago. Like, this was a very troubled person back then. And as they say in the documentary, he was getting therapy. Steven Jackson even builds on that and says in the All the Smoke interview of Jermaine O'Neal, that he had the same therapist. They were seeing the same therapist, but he wasn't. He was angered by Ron because Steven Jackson had the same therapist, but wasn't doing any of the stuff that Ron Artest was. And like, looking at that through a 2021 lens, it's just like, well, yeah, you're different people.
Well, yeah.
Right.
But at the time, they're like 22 and 23 years old or something like that. They're super young. They're super young.
Crazy.
Yeah. But it was quite weird because they talk about him having the therapist like it is an unusual thing to have. And then Stack sort of saying that they have the same therapist. And then they also like they speak about Ron like they say, oh, he had a couple of screws loose and stuff. It's like it's kind of, I think it's quite surprising to hear them talk about him in that way in this day and age. But that was kind of the opinion, that was the sort of the
yeah. Back then, that's the way that you see. If you have a therapist, you must be crazy, right?
Yeah.
Right.
It's not about your mental health. It's like, oh my God, you're crazy and you're gonna be trouble, right? So there was a perception around Ron Artest, like no matter what he did in the game, he couldn't do anything right. Like, I guess, like in or out. Like, he reminded me, watching the documentary and then watching the interview and All the Smoke, he reminded me so much of Dennis Rodman in many, many ways. In ways like, obviously very troubled, must have had a tough past, he needed some time off, and he didn't have a Phil Jackson, that could be like, and he wasn't as valuable, I guess, as Dennis Rodman, and didn't have Jordan either. But if he would have done that today, it probably would be different, right? Like Kyrie Irving does it.
Exactly, but Kyrie got a shitload of backlash against that, right? And he was very open about, like, guys, I need to have this. It's like a mental health thing, or it was stuff that he wanted to do with his community.
But back then, Ron Artest wouldn't have said that. He didn't say, guys, I need some time off.
No,
he would just not show up, and he wouldn't say it. And but he wouldn't say it because he would have, I mean, imagine the backlash back then. If the backlash is big now, back then he would probably be like just like fired, or contract like broken or whatever. I don't know.
And it was really, you could see it was really damaging with his relationship with Jermaine O'Neal. It goes, it shows Jermaine O'Neal giving like a locker room interview type thing, where first he says, I'm not talking about Ron, and basically it's like, he's not talking to me. I'm only concerned with people who are here playing. And you're like, okay, you've said a lot without talking about it. You've said a lot.
And the other thing was, he lied, right? When he goes to the Source Awards, he tells them that he's got a funeral, and then he
Yeah, that
shows up
was-
at the Source Awards making a
That's not
public
good.
appearance, and it's just like that's really bad. That's really bad. But yeah, it was an interesting thing to mention, not only because they mentioned him bringing out a rap album, but the date of the release of the rap album was like a week or two after the Malice in the Palace actually happens. And I don't know if you remember this, Mike, but oh no, wait, hold on, I'm trying to place it. Oh no, it's 04. Yeah, it's
You're at
04.
uni.
No, we're not at uni yet, not till 05. But I remember him actually putting out the album while he was still suspended. Right?
Okay.
That was one of the things that happens. They don't touch on it in the doc, but it's like, yeah, he's suspended from the league and he still puts out the rap album and tries to go and promote it and stuff like that. And it's one of those things that was a point of contention because he's caused this thing. He's sunk his own season, to be fair, but also the team season. And then he puts out an album.
He's got nothing else to do. He's got nothing else on. Fairly empty.
Yeah, but now we know there were like court cases going on behind the scenes
Sure.
and things
Yeah.
like that. And as they say, they weren't allowed to talk about it.
Yeah, it was mad. Like
I remember at the time, like I remember watching the game live actually, and then I was trying to find it on TV the next day on like Sports Center. At the time, there was no YouTube yet, I think.
No, not yet.
Or it was like super new. There were no things like that really. So I remember that I couldn't find footage of the actual incident for like 5 or 6 years because the NBA managed to remove it from everywhere. So yeah, the players weren't allowed to talk about it, but also nobody was allowed to talk about it because nobody saw what happened if you didn't see it live.
Yeah.
Right? Crazy.
Yeah, insane. And then so we come to the incident itself. The game starts, the Pacers are giving it to him, and I found it hilarious that they spoke about how Ron Artest was dominating them. They couldn't stop him. And at the end of the game, he has 24 points. Woo! Like James
What was the
Harden
final
gets that in a
score?
quarter now.
Final score was 97-82. Good old days, people.
blowout.
24 points out of 97.
yeah,
That's like
a quarter of the
25%
points.
of the team's points. So that's pretty good, right?
Yeah.
No, it was
Yeah,
in that day. It was.
Yeah.
It definitely was.
Yeah. So they go winning, dominating the game, and then oh my gosh, I couldn't believe. See, I don't remember this being the catalyst for it. And when I went back and watched the Ron Artest interview, which I've watched before, I don't remember them saying this. Like they remembered in so much detail in those two interviews that I was like, man, like they really like lived it to be able to recant all of this stuff that happened when so many different things happen. So the game it's a blowout. The Pacers are up big, and Jamal Tinsley tells Ron Artest, you can go and get that foul you wanted, was it? Is that what he said? Something like that? You can get that foul you want.
So now you can get your foul.
Yeah,
Oh,
now you can get your foul. And he's like, what? And he repeats it. And then Ron Artest understands it. And they come down the floor and Steven Jackson hears what was said and is like, what? Like, why would you antagonize Ron Artest of all people? And then he goes and makes sure that he is guarding Ben Wallace on the other end because he knows that's who Ron is going to try and target. And then Ben Wallace gets the ball, makes a post move. I don't know why they fed Ben Wallace in that moment. Makes a post move. Steven Jackson moves out of the way. That's what he says in the Ron Artest interview. He's just like, I'm going to let him get the bucket. The game is over. We're just going to run the timeout. And then as Wallace drop steps to his left, and goes for the layup. Ron Artest basically jumps into his back, fouls him hard, knocks him to the ground, and Ben Wallace gets up and pushes Ron Artest, beginning the on-court part of the melee. It's important to note that none of the players on the Pacers knew that Ben Wallace's brother had died.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty close to that game happening. So he was obviously going through other things, and he wanted to channel, he says in the documentary, he wanted to channel his emotions through play, right? We've all mentioned how basketball is a great escape for us, and it was the same for him, right? But they didn't know that. So Ron Artest goes and gets his cheap foul. He tries to claim it wasn't that hard of a foul, but like, I'm sure what's not hard for him is hard when you're feeling it from him.
Well, that's it. It wasn't a crazy foul, but it was just dumb, and it was clearly like
The
an
timing, right?
intentional dick foul, right? Like it was
a dick foul. I mean, you got Ben Wallace on the floor. I mean, you got to move Ben Wallace. He was a freaking statue at the time.
He's a big dude.
Yeah.
And then, you're up big. So why are you getting the cheap foul? Like, it would make so much more sense if one of the Pistons kicked it off by doing something. So they were not only destroying them on the court, he decided to try and destroy him physically as well. And that kicks off the melee. The players start pushing and shoving, and everyone knows nothing is going to come of that. That happens all the time. And then Ron Artest goes and lays down on the scorer's table. And I can't even remember who mentioned it, but someone says it's not normal, right?
Yes.
Commentator.
Commentator, yeah.
Right.
Which
go ahead.
Well, so this is when the first time in the entire documentary when I rolled my eyes, and because of what that guy said, and I was like, this is not normal. And I was like, and I don't know if it was just me, but I was like, why? Why is it not normal? Like fighting on a basketball court is not normal either. But like, why is his reaction not normal? Like he's trying to diffuse the situation by going somewhere else. Like, okay, he could have gone back to the bench,
there.
fine. But it's Ron Artest. It's Ron Artest. Like it's fine.
But it was somewhat performative. I think you might sort of say, like, he could have, if he was taking himself away, he could have just gone and stood somewhere else.
Yeah.
But like he did go on. But it was a very placid thing to do. It was a very
But that's the thing. It's a non-threatening action that he did.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
I rolled my eyes,
just
right?
let him do
it.
Let him do it. Absolutely.
The way he said it was that, it's borderline insulting, or it's not normal. I was like,
no, it's not. No, it's
it's
not.
non-threatening. The guy is literally, it's Ron Artest literally being non-threating.
And
that's
it is the least threatening Ron Artest can be in a basketball court, right?
Exactly.
Just let him lay down. That's better for you than if he's looking at you, asking for a switch or something. Yeah, like, come on, man. Honestly.
And that's how it's interpreted. That's how we've interpreted it. But then when you look at it from I think they showed some of the fan perspective. It was like they've destroyed them at home. They've fouled one of their players, and then gone and laid down on the scorer's table. And he actually like puts his arms behind his head. And I think what happened was it was interpreted as being cocky, arrogant.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I've just pushed him, and now I'm going to go and lie down and kick back
done my
in
job.
your home.
Yeah.
And watch him go get angry and him go crazy.
It's important to know that the fans that were interviewed were the fans, and who said it? One of the players said, I think during the documentary, that so the seats that are closer to the court are obviously expensive seats, right? If you're getting blown out, Reggie Miller said, if you're getting blown out and you have, and this is one of the first games in the season, you don't give a shit. People who pay a lot of money, they don't care. They have season tickets, they will leave. So the problem was, one of the problems was the fans that were in the all the way at the back that paid probably $10 for their seats are now super drunk and next to the court, right?
Exactly. And they were already riled up because this was a rivalry. Like, that much was for sure.
Mm.
We all knew that. If we didn't know the Pacers were the best team in the league, we knew this was a big rivalry. And yeah, so they had it circled in their calendar. Ron Artest said he had it circled in his calendar. And then I think the way that he lay down, given the circumstances, given how riled up the fans were, it was interpreted the wrong way. It was taken the wrong way. Ron speaks to the 5-second rule. I think do they call it a 5-second rule, or do they call it the 5-second practice or something like that, whereby if anything happens and you're in a situation or a bad situation, you get to somewhere peaceful and you count to 5. So that's why he lay down on the table. It was go there, count to 5, just give yourself time to think about what's going on and what you should be doing in this moment. And that was it. Like totally peaceful, totally calm. And then Ben Wallace starts throwing his headbands into the crowd and at the Pacers players.
Which was funny because the guy was like, oh, he started throwing headbands and everything, and then he was throwing shit, but he still had as many as on. It's like he kept throwing still, like, how many pieces have you got on right now? It's like 1 headband, 2 headband, 3
big arm, like wristbands. He was the first player that I remember with a really big, and it was him and Rashid Wallace. Nobody else in the league wore them because they were the towel ones. Now you have the shooting sleeves, right? But back then that was like, oh my god, that was so cool, dude.
It reminded me of those comedies when people like they have one pair of sunglasses, they're taking off, there's another pair of sunglasses underneath. Like, calm down with the headbands. Chill.
He also wore like an armband kind of thing.
Yeah, like a bicep kind of like, so that looked, but I mean, he was probably the only player in the league that could wear them with those massive arms, man.
Muscles, and I think some of those came off and got thrown as well. So he had plenty to throw. But someone else decided to throw something. A guy that we later learned was John Green. Does the old underhand Rick Barry. He tried to do the what do they call that challenge? The bottle.
Flip the bottle. Is it flip the bottle? Or...
Tried to do that challenge on Ron Artest from the crowd, and he flips the bottle up. It spins almost in slow motion. They said Reggie Miller saw it out of the corner of his eye, and that bottle hits Ron Artest as he's laying on the scorer's table. Then he runs.
It's a hell of a shot. It's a
beautiful shot. I mean, give it to him.
Ron Artest isn't the smallest, guys.
Still though, but they could have landed on
right in the face, man.
Yeah. And they were actually laughing about it. That kind of I found a bit weird. Watching the Ron Artest interview, with All the Smoke interview, they were laughing the whole way through it. But they're a lot more serious in the JO interview. They're a lot more serious in the documentary. And the bottle hits him and he sits up, he sees where it comes from, and he goes running into the crowd, straight past John Green, and grabs the guy next to him.
Yo, imagine being that guy. Imagine seeing Ron Artest going at you.
Did you see his face? God. Have you seen his face in slow motion? Because the thing is one of the first clips that I saw of the Malice in the Palace, like one of the first ones that actually came. Like Jose said, there was a period of time when you couldn't see anything, but that was the first clip I saw after that. And his face is, he goes like the cartoons, like his jaw actually goes, and his eyes bug out of his head.
Like, this is it. This I had a good life. This is it. Done.
What's funny is that Ron Artest said in the All the Smoke interview that he didn't know who threw it, so he just saw a guy and he like targeted that guy, right? So he went to grab the guy and that's it, and then he gets sucker punched.
Yeah.
So that's how he's like, okay, fuck this, right? Like so crazy.
He has a beer thrown directly in his face by a fan in the row behind. Steven Jackson gives him the fists. And then actually John Green grabs Ron Artest from behind and then starts sucker punching him.
Yeah.
And then in my notes, shortly after that, I wrote this down.
Scumbag.
there's a fan that grabs Fred Jones from behind. A big Detroit fan grabs Fred Jones and just starts pummeling him in the face.
Yeah.
And Fred Jones is literally there just trying to break things up. And the fan just goes and starts boxing him in the head. And it's just like, wow. Like, these guys really ran towards the trouble.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, they really ran towards the trouble. Rasheed Wallace jumps in the crowd. He apparently made, he was part of the documentary. He gave statements. He
Oh, really?
Yeah, he spoke in the documentary, but it was all edited out. And
Oh, right.
one of the things Jermaine says in his interview is he doesn't know why it didn't make it into the doc. He was also on a podcast, which I listened to, which I didn't share. So maybe he said it on there. Yeah, he says he doesn't know why none of his parts made it into the documentary, but I'd love to know what his mentality was in that moment, if nothing else.
Yes.
Because once the other guys go into the crowd, he goes up there as well. And I wonder if his mentality was to break it up. I wonder if he was more with the fan side, or if he saw players in a bad situation and went in there to try and be a mediator type of thing. But yeah, that fan just started boxing poor Fred Jones. Like, what did Fred Jones do to anyone?
Nothing.
He just accidentally won the dunk contest.
Have you seen the? He wasn't in the doc, but have you seen what player who's currently on the Pistons actually was chucking bottles during the brawl? There was a 8 years old Josh Jackson in the audience chucking bottles.
No way.
Are you serious?
And I know that because he went out and he went, yeah, I was in the crowd. I was chucking bottles on Ron Artest as well. I'm like, dude, shut up.
Wow.
God.
He's at the Pistons now. He's on the roster.
Yeah.
I mean, well,
made it.
I'm sorry, but if you're 7 or 8 years old and you see all of these grown ass men doing this thing, like, you're not gonna do it.
Whoever you're with needs to take you to the other side.
Oh yeah,
get you the hell out of Dodge. But yeah, I did just want to highlight that, and then we have Tim Donaghy appearance. He pops up and makes some comments, and I was just like, wow, like, this was so long ago. For the fact that he's still in the same place at the same time.
And I was thinking, it's like, you've got no moral high ground there, so don't go and be smart with us. Like, you cannot judge anyone in this. Like, you shush. You know?
I don't know. For some reason, I feel so much more leniently about what he did than I did at the time. Like,
still not. No.
Yeah, he bet on some games. All right.
It's a ref, though.
I know it's bad, right? But do you know what it is? It's because I know a ref can only affect a game so much.
They can mess up a whole game.
No, they can. But like, if players make shots, they could lose their bets. All of them.
Right?
Yeah.
Every single one of them.
Anyway,
but hey, I don't know. Maybe I'm
it's another discussion.
An airy fairy kind of guy now.
Vanilla.
And also, he's great friends with Scott Foster, who is still refereeing in the league. And after his betting agent, the next most number of calls he made on his phone was to Scott Foster. And there's a very strong belief that Scott Foster was also fixing games, but David Stern just wanted to paint the narrative that it was one bad apple and that there wasn't any other issues with the refereeing.
That's what the NBA has done for ages, isn't it?
Exactly. And I think that's bull. And I think if he was doing it, Scott Foster was doing it for sure. And Scott Foster's still refereeing today. Chris Paul still hates him.
Yeah, well, yeah. Isn't that the one that he's got the record?
Yeah. So there you go.
But Dave, you just said refs don't affect games, do they?
Chris Paul's hamstring does. But yeah, that was a crazy throwback. Just to have him as an actual quote as well. It was just like, wait, what? This guy.
Reliable source.
So yeah, so then back on the court, I guess, Ron Artest eventually gets taken out of the crowd and comes back down onto the court where he believes he's safe. And Haddad,
My
Fucking best
God.
film.
squares up
That guy.
to him. Clench his fist.
Standing up, like looking at him, like
He did not want it, man. He did not want it.
why?
I'm
So
here
Why
now.
did he do?
Oh,
Why
shit.
in the hell would you do that? Like,
I will
what
tell you
is
why.
wrong
I
with
will tell
you?
you why. I will tell you why because I actually read about that guy and the reasons why. Did you know, Dave? Have you seen?
He's a
I
fucking
know
idiot.
some stuff that he said afterwards, but go ahead.
Not by the way say afterwards, but I don't know if it's the same thing or the same. We're going to the same place, but he was actually being spied on, or he was on the Pistons lists for wanting to fight any NBA player to win a lawsuit and get some cash money out of him.
No way. Yeah.
So I don't know if that was what was on his mind at that moment. He was like, "Oh, there's my cue." I don't know if he was that clever and quick on his feet to go, "Hey, this is my cue now," or if he actually was in the heat of the game and went, "I need to find someone." I think he went, "Yeah, cash money right here." But he could have died though. He could have died.
He could have
He got to it.
easily
Like
died.
it looked like he jumped to that conclusion pretty quickly because on the way out, he's basically you can see him planting the seeds for a claim.
Yes, that interview
so
after
much-
that, right?
And he lives in a stretcher, doesn't he? He goes
Yes,
away
he
in a
lives-
stretcher. Like, come on, he
lives on a
punched
stretcher.
here, and he needs the next thing. Like, come
But
on.
But not before giving a live TV interview saying his name and
Yeah.
saying, "Oh, I was on the court. I got punched." It's like, come on, dude.
Yeah.
Come on.
And he said he said my face needs x-rays.
Yes.
My face needs all the x-rays.
All the X-rays.
Oh my
Yo,
god.
but
I was
seriously,
cracking up.
out of
So
everyone involved in the incident, him and was it John Green? Is that his name? The other guy?
Yeah.
Those two are like I've got very, very bare minimum sympathy for them. Like,
Absolutely.
everyone else I understand the
100%.
conditions and
No,
I don't say okay, zero at all. But like, I understand where they came from, understand the context in which it all happened. But like those two,
it's more like whatever happened then, but it's their attitude towards it now. Like
yeah, as well.
don't
They
give a shit.
still stand by what they did, basically.
Yeah,
It's like
absolutely.
no regret whatsoever, right?
Yeah.
Like even the players are regretting punching them, but these guys are not regretting what they did. Like, I can't believe it. Absolutely.
Mm. And like almost like the fucking douchebag Green guy, like he was almost like proud of what he'd
Yeah.
done. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, I just can't believe it.
he didn't like. I just don't know how you don't even feel like shameful about it. Like
Mm.
I've learned that some people are incapable of reflecting on their actions and their behavior. Something
Yeah.
I've learned recently. But
The
Yeah.
only thing he was afraid of was getting arrested and getting in trouble, right? That was it. When he made the police phone call, he was like, "Oh, am I
Am I
in trouble?" And the policeman carefully like stepped around it because
Oh,
he
yeah.
was in trouble, really.
of course,
But he said no one's been charged. No one's being charged.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like,
that's
yeah,
your
I
cue
haven't
to run
charged
when
you,
somebody
but-
say no one's
Exactly.
been charged. Shit.
He did say
Exactly.
yet. He did say yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, going back to Haddad,
Mhm.
who needed all the x-rays, he then goes to the security lady's office. That's where they put them. And she said that she heard them talking about suing the players and getting a bunch of money,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And then afterwards he says, they tried to make out that I instigated the whole thing.
But
And
yeah,
it's like, well, yeah, you did. You went over
did.
the court.
it's on camera.
You ran up to the guy with your fists like ready.
Yeah.
Like, what do you
Um,
think is gonna happen at that point? And even
but-
like Ron Artest, like he hesitates. He
Yeah.
could have gone like whoa, or something like that. There
And
was
he misses, right? Because he was slippery. He says that he
No,
Jermaine,
misses.
that's O'Neal. That's
Or
O'Neal.
is it
running
Jermaine
out.
O'Neal?
Yeah.
Jermaine
So-
O'Neal misses because imagine a punch from Jermaine O'Neal as well. Like, that guy was
Oh.
out. We wouldn't
I
have
I love that
Ten.
quote.
testimony.
That's the best miss of his career. I was like,
That's
Really, Bella.
crazy.
It's-
Yeah. So what actually happens is Artest gives a very detailed account of why he was there at the time, and he's just like, I went down to the court because I knew after what had happened in the stands, I'd be safe on the court. So he went down to the court, stayed out of trouble, and then the fan comes down, Haddad, squares up to him, and then he realizes he's holding fists, right? He says at first he was shocked and startled because he's just like, why is this person running towards me? And then he realizes that he's actually holding his fists, and he's like, oh my gosh, like he's gonna try and hit me. So he goes to hit him first, and he realizes that there's beer on the floor, and that if he actually plants his foot and tries to follow through, he'll slip, and yeah, whatever, he'll slip. So he just throws out like a straight, and then the guy's friend comes over, and there's a little bit of a tussle, and that's when Jermaine O sees that happen. From Jermaine O'Neill's perspective, he's seen what happened in the stands with the beer being thrown. He's seen Reggie Miller also getting into it with fans, and he was out of the game with his thumb in a cast. And then I think Anthony Johnson as well was injured, and he's being manhandled by someone. So all around him, what you don't see in any of the footage is that all of these other things are going on away from the actual melee, and he's just seeing all of his teammates in danger, basically. So someone jumps and hooks him around the neck, and he turns, picks up the person and dumps them on the scorer's table. And then he looks up and sees Ron Artest being squared up to by this guy. And that's when he comes running and slips on the same beer that Ron Artest felt and saw. And yeah, hits him with that sliding blow. And the fan goes down.
I mean, it was that shot. My God, because he's so tall and he's coming down.
Yeah,
and it's just like they say it, like if he'd fully connected, like that is
who knows?
Good at that.
Yeah,
my God, because he's still like you could see it, like he is messed up by whoever got him properly, and I think it was Jermaine O'Neil.
Yeah,
some would say it would be her dad. Thank you.
Terrible.
Thank you.
He's
Get
there all
out of
night.
All night.
Tom, wake up. You told us if you start sleeping, we should wake you up. Yeah. And then I can't even believe that he gives that. He he goes to the cameras and says, I need x-rays all on my face, and then leaves with a neck brace on a stretcher. That is horrendous. Oh my gosh, America. So, obviously this whole time you guys were thinking, where's the police? Well, we find out there were 3 policemen, a crowd of 20,000 people, and whatever, 22 players or however many players was on a roster back then, 24. And a bunch of officials.
3 tiny, semi-racist policemen. Right?
Nice. It's like
well, the 3 that were on duty weren't the 3 that rushed in onto the court. That's the craziest thing. Those 3 that were on duty were nowhere to be seen while the whole melee was happening. And then a woman makes a 911 call, tells them they're fighting. The players are fighting. You have to come quick. The players are fighting.
Brilliant.
I wish they put in the subtitles like Karen. Karen, they're fighting. But then parts of me was like, they're black. quickly.
So we see the police rush in and rush out onto the court, which was a weird shot. Like, who was filming that? Like, who, while all of this melee is going on, who had a camera outside the court filming police arriving on the scene? Totally weird. Think about that for a second. And the police run out onto the court with mace. and run up to
Yeah.
Ron
They want to
Artest.
mace Reggie Miller, man.
Out
Of all the people.
of all the people,
The only
the one
guy in
the,
the suits.
the guy in the suit, the one that's the most famous guy out of all the players. The most famous guy.
Decade.
2 decades. He'd been there for 2 decades.
2
At that
decades,
point.
yeah.
It'd been like 15, 16 years.
I mean, fucking American police, man. God, they just see black people and they're just like, it's this guy, it's this guy.
And then he says in the interview, I had no intention of macing Ron Artest.
Yeah.
He looks oh my God.
I just ran over to him and I wanted to get him off the court and away from the situation. And Reggie Miller, he says
the lawyer, said his lawyer.
My lawyer told me to say this.
Exactly.
And he said, I see a guy in a suit. I don't know if he's a player or Reggie Miller. And I was like, wait, I think you got your line wrong.
Yeah.
Because if it's a player or Reggie Miller, you shouldn't have acted the way that you were acting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just incredible.
Oh man, he exposed himself. So anyway, he's there holding his mace, trying to tug on Reggie Miller and Ron Artest. Tom's soft, man. I don't even know who you are anymore.
I will not.
And yeah, Reggie Miller just refuses to let Artest go with him. And then I think the next thing we see is Ron Artest being hauled off the court. And I think that's what they said. The smartest thing was for them to get all the players off the court. So they start hauling them off the court. And then at this point, all the fans just start throwing every single thing that's in their hands, popcorn, drinks, everything and anything, hot dogs, everything.
The one that pissed me off was that one guy that was like casually just dropping drinks like this onto them. And he was like, yeah. How many bottles did you have?
And that's the weirdest thing, right? When you looked at their faces, the fans were loving it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
They were loving it. It was like carnage, and they were just enjoying themselves, throwing their drinks on the players. And yeah, so they do that. They haul the players off, and then one of the fans throws a chair at Jermaine O'Neal. I don't think it actually gets to him. But
there was that shot of that old man on the
basically being trampled, right? Yeah,
was that trampled? Yeah,
it's after the chair's thrown. Yeah. Right. Yeah, and then you also saw a shot behind all of that of like a woman holding a kid who's just crying his eyes out, as you would in that situation.
Yeah.
Josh Jackson.
Unless you're Josh Jackson.
Just getting involved.
I missed.
More drinks. Yeah, so the players go off and go to the locker room, and Ron Artest says his famous line, do you think we're going to get in trouble, to Stack Jack? And Jamal Tinsley starts laughing his head off. And then they didn't say this in the Ron Artest interview, but Jermaine said it in his interview. He said when Ron Artest said that, he interpreted it as Ron Artest not taking the situation seriously. And he was super angry at him, and he says like a little kerfuffle unfolds after that.
Yeah, he had to be separated.
Yeah, they had to be separated in the locker room. Because to him, he was protecting his teammates. And for Ron Artest to make that comment, and I think it was misread. He misspoke, because I think what he really meant was like, is this over?
Yeah, or probably just thinking about the championship, like are we going to be able, are we going to be suspended? Maybe he was just thinking about the team, right? Like,
is there anything
like when are we going to be able to play again? Something like that, right?
Any more punishment?
But Jermaine, and Jermaine, of course, he's a guy that he said it, and they both said it. They all said it, that Jermaine was like the serious one, that was like the most focused one, the captain of the team, blah blah blah, whatever. So
and he
obviously
like
misinterpreted that
already, like
kind of,
did not like the guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, because of everything that had happened.
But I think it's either he meant it as in, are we gonna get in trouble, as in like we're in the locker room now, there's not gonna be any more trouble coming our way.
Yeah.
I think it's because it's I think Ron Artest at the time, he doesn't see the world the same way than everybody else, right? I don't think he analyzes and comprehends events the same way that everybody else. Not saying because he's seen a psychiatrist and all that stuff, but I don't think his perception of what's going on around him was quite.
I think it's a bit of that, but like in his mind, he's gone somewhere to try and get himself out of trouble. Somebody's thrown something at him, he's responded. Then people start hitting him, he's responded, and other people have responded. Then somebody squares up to him and he's responded. Like I think that he genuinely thought that he was acting in some self-defense.
It's self-defense, exactly.
Wouldn't be that bad. I think it took him maybe a little bit of reflection to realize what that means to the league, how bad it looks, and we see after that.
And that's what I mean. It's like for him, it's like he's not looking at it as an act of aggression. It's more of an act of defense. And like, are we gonna get in trouble? Yes, there was a fight, but for him, it's like clearly we were defending ourselves. Are we gonna get in further trouble? Right.
Yeah. And yeah, so then afterwards, obviously, David Stern takes 4 days and then issues the suspensions to the players. And he's asked whether there was
unanimous.
Yeah, whether it was a unanimous decision, because the reporter assumes that all of the owners were asked and everyone involved at the league was asked. And he says, yes, it was unanimous, 1-0, because he made the decision. There's a nice clip of Stephen A explaining that normally in these incidents, there would be the team would represent either side, and then there would be an arbitrator in the middle who would be the third party involved. But because it happened on the court, it only had to go to David Stern, and it only went through David Stern. So he just made that decision in and of himself. Cut to the court proceedings, and there's actual criminal cases involved in the whole thing, and a civil case to follow that, which is quite common when anything happens that goes to court in America. And
100%.
They appeal the decision of the league to suspend them for the number of games that they got. And Jermaino actually manages to get his games reduced because he, in court, goes to the judge and says, what am I supposed to tell my children if I'm getting punished for protecting my teammates? Like, this is the situation from my eyes and my perspective, and all I did is protect my teammates. So what am I supposed to tell my children to do when they're faced with a situation where, you know, if you're an older male and someone attacks your mother, you're just supposed to stand there and let it happen, right? So he lent on their conscience in that sense, and got his games reduced by 10, which is a huge amount considering he got 25. And then at the same time, and if you didn't watch the smoke interview, you won't know this, and it's not in the documentary. While Jermaine is up there talking, Ron Artest writes a note, puts it in an envelope, and passes it to Steven Jackson. And when Steven Jackson recounts this story, oh my God, you just wouldn't. It's just so painful. You can feel how loud it was, because it's a courtroom. One person is talking, absolute silence, and he's messing around with this paper, writes something down, and loudly passes this note across the table. And Steven Jackson's like, everyone in the courtroom knew he was passing the paper. There was nothing discreet about it. And he looked at the piece of paper, and the piece of paper said, Mike,
did you really hit that guy?
Did you really hit that guy?
Oh, dear.
And Steven Jackson said once he looked at that paper, he knew his games weren't getting reduced, and he knew Ron Artest's games weren't getting reduced. In the doc, he says that he didn't go up there with any story about his kids or anything like that. He just said, look, I was protecting my teammates. I'm sorry I embarrassed the league and I shouldn't have done it. And that was it. Right. And then our test goes up and their games don't get reduced. Only Jermaine's does. But
they said that Ron Artest didn't seem to really take it that seriously. Like he came in sort of dressed a bit sort of funky, like he didn't put any effort in.
His jacket and his trousers weren't matching. They weren't from the same suit, guys.
Yeah. I think he said he was wearing trainers as well.
Yes. Yeah.
So
yeah, but
I mean, at that time, people were funky suits anyway. They were big and long, and I'm still remembering that.
You don't fuck about it.
Sure, but they were NBA players. You know, they would wear big suits. I remember when people are throwing stuff at Jermaine O'Neal coming out of the court, and Scott Pollard is next to Jermaine O'Neal, and he is spotless, man. He doesn't have one drop, one piece of Concord. Like
crazy. That's crazy. I'm gonna go back and look at that. That is so bad.
Please go back and look at it. Scott Pollard. The only reason I remember Scott Pollard is because he couldn't defend Shaq for shit.
Yeah.
Right? He would get massacred by Shaq.
6 fouls.
And you look at him, he looks perfect. And he's coming right like next to Jermaine O'Neal. It's crazy.
So wild. So yeah, Jermaine actually wins that case, and then they go on to talk about the actual criminal cases against the fans, which they also managed to win, right? John Green gets convicted of what is it, assault? It's assault and something else as well.
It's battery and something like that.
Yeah, aggravated battery.
Aggravated, yeah.
Yeah, for throwing the drink. I think her dad gets something as well, but it's not. Is it assault? I don't think it is assault.
Hang on, carry on.
It was a misdemeanor. He got like he didn't get sort of jail time, whereas
yeah, it wasn't jail time.
And all the players got anger management counseling as well. If you want to go back to what the players had to go and get some anger management. I'm trying to look up what the guys the fans got, but can't find it right now. Carry on.
Yeah. So they did say in the documentary that they all got like community service and things like that. So none of them saw jail time except for John Green, I think.
Okay, so Green. So according to Wikipedia, he had several previous criminal convictions, including counterfeiting, carrying a concealed weapon, felony assault, 3 DUI. God, and he was already in a brawl somewhere else. So
nice guy, man. Nice guy.
All around good. So yeah, assault and battery. That's what he's got.
Assault and battery. Yeah. So actually, this is the saddest part, right? Like we remember and attribute a lot of what happened to the players, to Ron Artest running in the stands, Stephen Jackson running in the stands, Jermaine O'Neal punching a fan. But actually, a court of law decided that the fans were the ones in the wrong.
Yeah.
Like a fan threw a bottle onto the court. A fan punched Fred Jones in the head, like a fan threw a chair. But the league decided that in order to protect the product, they had to blame the players and not hold the fans accountable at all. And it's funny that this documentary came out this year after what we saw during the season last year, once fans were allowed into stands with multiple fans spitting at players and all kinds of things going on with poor fan behavior. And today, we look at it as poor fan behavior, right? The league is in a very different place to where it was back then. Like the dress code is done away with. PJ Tucker has diamonds in his shoes now. And the same, that also mirrors the way that we look at mental health. And it's just funny to think that if the same chain of events was to happen today, it would probably go a very different way. Like, I don't think it turns into what it turned into. Like now, when a player pushes a player, you see how quickly people step in and separate everything.
Right.
Whereas with the Malice, it just lingered. I
don't think you would ever see a situation where there's that lack of security and lack of police presence.
Agree.
I think
Like
the only thing.
Sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say the only thing that would probably still be the same is the way, because you've not touched on that, but the media, because they had that little clip going like, the word thug being repeated over and over again, and I fortunately think it still could be the same response from them, which is like not trying to, or like, obviously I've seen those clips before, like the uncut version of those interviews and stuff, but it's like there's no deeper analysis than that. It's like players, the end. How come you went into the stand?
I think that would be different.
And because hip hop and because double XL, hoodies and stuff like that. I'm like
tattoos. It's the tattoos,
bling bling,
but only on the black people, not on the white people.
Paul Porter had tattoos too.
No, but it's fine. It's fine if you're white and you're wearing a quadruple XL jersey. It's okay. Okay, that's fine. It's okay.
Yeah. They blamed hip hop. That's so funny today. Yeah, but it worked, didn't it? They managed to salvage the league, and here we are, years later.
Well, I mean, the league would always have survived, right? Like I don't know what they would have expected to.
You never know. You never know. Just because of, like Tom's saying, like the way that the media portrayed it, the fact that they then didn't hold any of the fans accountable publicly, that then meant that the league had to react to, in a way to calm white America's issues with a very black, very hip hop league. It could, not the same thing, but similar thing was going on in the 70s when David Stern saved the league the first time, they say. Like players were on coke, players were high, players were drunk, there was this issue of substance abuse and it being attributed to the black players in the league, and people white America not wanting that as a product on their screens. And I think that is what had to be resolved, right? How can we still sell this product to the masses in America on a daily basis? Because if it's this image, they're not going to watch it. So we need to change that image to this.
I get the impression that it would be like more like parents wouldn't want to bring their kids into it and sort of show their kids, right? Like when
it's not just that, because when you listen to to them mention like the entitlement, right? They're zillionaires, one of the media personalities said. It would affect the adults as well.
Yeah, fair enough.
The children as well, for sure. Like you couldn't market it as a family product.
That's what I mean. Like I think when you can market things as a family-based product, it sort of doubles your money, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But
if not more.
I still think that incident has led directly to what we see in the NBA now, and how
100%.
the criticism
Absolutely.
of how soft, because like regardless of what your personal opinion is about the way it's played, everything around it. Most of the older players, most of the older fans will tell you, the league is super soft, the way they play, the way there's no, even the refereeing is like there's no contact allowed, there's there's very little physicality left. I think it comes directly from this, which is like, all right, we had this as a like the bottom of what we can experience. Now they're going the completely exact opposite of what it is, which is like, we don't want any contact, we don't want any
quick whistle.
none of that is allowed.
Well, they did bring in rules as a direct consequence of this. They don't
Yeah.
really go into in the documentary that much, and that was the dress code, the clearing the bench. As soon as that happened, it was sort of automatic suspensions.
Yeah.
And there was something else as well that I've forgotten.
Or even just how quickly they call text, right?
Yeah.
They had a crackdown on any sort of like physical violence.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I think one of them was leaving the court, right? You had to leave the court in a timely fashion once you're ejected, because Ben Wallace stayed out there, and that was one of the things that they needed to change. But yeah, it absolutely does, and that is exactly why it is the way it is. But you also have to remember that ignoring the malice, look at the basketball being played. And this was the teams involved, the Pistons, the Pacers, and then the team that actually goes on to win the championship, the Spurs. That particular period, 04-05, was looked at as the lowest period in terms of scoring, in terms of defenses having the advantage, and in terms of having exciting offensive play. Like that finals is known as being one of the most like knockdown, drag out, no stars, no excitement, no fun finals.
Except for mine, obviously.
In like basketball history, essentially. It was Pistons versus the Spurs. Very workmanlike teams.
No razzle dazzle.
No razzle dazzle, except for Manu, as you said. And I know Tom loved it, and it was his favorite finals ever. But in terms of those things, the product was the exact opposite of the product that they want to show and put on the floor today.
This is where I don't. This is why I have an issue with what we're saying now, which is over everything offense. Not big and having stars gathering together and having this sort of Space Jam scenario and like Dream Team scenarios all over. Because
that's two separate things, though.
That's two separate things, but you know what I mean. It's like sometimes you'll have finals that are not that sexy, and you have like teams that play as teams and they don't know their roles. But you can't be all the time on a high, otherwise that spoil the product. You know what I mean? It's like if everything is marvelous all the time, you have to have some dog shit at some time to appreciate the good stuff. Do you know what I mean? But even though you look at it, you go back to it, you watch something, you watch the game, you watch them back, and you're like, well, actually, it played really well. It might be a little bit more.
Yes, it's really good basketball defense. It was just not,
and
defensively, yes.
That's what I'm trying to fight against with younger fans. It's like it's not all about the dunks. It's not about there's a lot of stuff like that is being highlighted now, especially we live in this this old man talking with like this sort of society where everything has to be fast and highlight and beautiful and awesome dunks and blocks and crossovers, even though you miss the layup after that. But like you need the basics, and you need those kind of stuff. You need the not beautiful game, the not awesome players, the average guy, the workers, like the blue collar teams. That you need those as well. They are allowed to win sometimes,
And you know what? It's very funny that you mentioned that, because that's when they show Reggie Miller retiring, right? And he's with his sister and he's crying and he says, "I'm a Pacer and a Hoosier." A lot of what you're saying, like that workmanlikeness, that's what was embodied by the Pacers organization. Like Hoosiers, the movie, I'll be talking about it soon. It embodies all of those sort of traits. And where I think, I'm not necessarily saying that you are doing this, Tom, but where I think people that glorify that side of things, what you ignore is the fact that the same players that are running, jumping, dunking, shooting threes, they had to put in so much work to get there. Like, it's not that they, like, Steph Curry's never dived for a ball before. Like, that's not the case. It's just that he can do all this other stuff. That's freaking amazing.
My point is that the things we're seeing getting most views and talked about are, of course, the highlights and the stuff, but like the things that make you win and the things that I feel are getting brushed aside nowadays is the things that you don't see in the stats, the things you don't see in the highlights. It's all about balance. You have to have both, you know.
It'll
It feels at
occur,
the
but it
moment it's
won't
like, it's
necessarily
very
get
one-sided.
highlighted. Yeah, no. That's true. That's true. Yeah, but I wouldn't blame the players, is what I would say.
No.
Like,
At all. It's the NBA, it's the product, is their what sells.
They
right?
are doing those things as well. It's just that they're not going to highlight the excellent defensive play that Durant makes on Giannis Antetokounmpo in extra time, in overtime. They're going to highlight the three.
In the 90s and 2000, we used to get the top 10s from the NBA. Do you know how many dive for a ball and blocks and hustle plays and stuff like that were in the top 10? And in the actual top 10, like number 8, that you got to do diving for a ball.
Right.
You don't get those anymore.
Right.
Because it's not sexy. Unless it's Shaq, then it's awesome.
I love that highlight of the bench clearing when he runs towards them.
That has to be one of the best things ever, man.
He'll just dive out the way. And
any Shaq highlights and lowlights are good, man. That's best.
Oh man, that guy's amazing. So, anyone have anything else?
I was just gonna say that it's like I came away from it sort of feeling just really down, especially for Jermaine O'Neal, because he's and Ron Artest as well, because you can see that it really has stuck with him. Like Ron Artest doesn't even look like he's enjoyed the fact that he's won a championship now, because he knows that he costs like Jermaine O'Neal and Reggie Miller a really good opportunity to get theirs. And Jermaine O'Neal, like his career was never the same. Like everybody leaves after that. Reggie retires. Reggie's got to be like one of the best players without a ring that has stayed at one team his entire career as well. And he came so close as well. So it's there was just like a lot of things where you're just like, oh man, that it sucks that it happened the way that it did and it didn't get that shot. Right. Whatever could have happened, as I said, like they're making it out like it was, if they got there, it was theirs. That's not necessarily the case, but they did have a good chance, and it's a shame that that got sort of taken away from them.
Yeah, to me, the one thing I had when it finished, I was like, this is funny because apart from all the tiny little facts that I didn't know about, like you've had two type of people with like within the one documentary. You had the guys that were entitled as hell, so the fans that did the actual bad beatings, and they're like, I did nothing. But then the guys that suffered the most is like the guy that were, the guys that were actually thrown under the bus at the time, and it felt like
it stuck with them. It's not with the fans. With them.
Whereas the other two guys, it's like, and it's like I bought a ticket, so I can chuck a bottle on him, sort of attitude. And I was like, there was the entitlement on one side, and then the unfulfilled dreams, because like that's why again going back to the media thing, when it's like, oh, gazillionaire, like bazillionaire people that don't care. It's like, no, actually, it's that sort of mentality saying like they play basketball and they reach, so they should shut up. It's like, no, man, they work super hard, like you said. Like there's so much behind the scenes that are going on to get to that one spot when you have a spot on one of the best teams in the world. Then you only had that, like how many shots do you get to a title? Maybe you just have the one. So when that's taken away from you and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I think it's a good job that the media does have a lot more and a lot greater sort of presence of ex-players, because the only person that you saw that was a media person speaking about basically on the side of the players then was Kenny the Jet. And I think like at that time he was one of the only people that had a loud sort of voice to be able to use that to sort of say, hang on a second, let's look at what actually happened, and these guys were protecting themselves. So,
well, you saw the demography of people that were talking of the other guys as thugs. It's like Fox News sort of people, you know what I'm saying? It's like, oh, look at that. let's go. It's like the bat signal. He went, pink guys, fight, black people, rap, thugs, let's go. It's like they're playing bingo with the keywords. Yeah, it's like, guys, let's play White America bingo. I've got thugs 5 times. Josh,
you know what I got from the documentary. Obviously, I love learning, like you just said, Tom, all the little things that we didn't know about it because of the way it was portrayed at the time. But so the way it affected me at the time, the Malice in the Palace, was that I kind of lost respect for Ron Artest, for Jermaine O'Neal, and for Stephen Jackson, you know, unfortunately. And I looked at them with different eyes ever since, until I saw this documentary. I don't even remember respecting Artest when he won the championship with the Lakers. I was just like, oh gosh, Ron Artest, I wish, I wouldn't want him in my team, you know. But then what I did was, and I told you before we started recording, is I saw a bunch of highlights from Ron Artest from his really good playing years, and I didn't see any attacking highlights. It was all defensive highlights.
He was an insane defender.
He shuts off Carmelo, shuts off Kobe, Paul Pierce, Ginobili. You know, like, you cannot score over this guy.
If I tell you he was one of my favorite players at the time.
I believe you. Like, you see these highlights. This guy, he was unstoppable in defense, and or unpassable, any way you want to call it. So I would strongly suggest anybody that doesn't know how these guys played, go and see highlights. I mean, Stephen Jackson was a sharpshooter, you know, like amazing 3-point shooter. Jermaine O'Neal, you know, totally underrated power forward. He was a bit smaller than the rest, and he still, you know, lead the league in blocks, you know, MIP, and then Ron Artest, defensive player, one of the best defensive players ever, in my opinion.
Well, we went through like the big men that were playing the game in that time, and they were defensive juggernauts, and it's Ron Artest that was like getting the defensive player of the year sort of clout, and the only one of his size sort of getting that as well. He was unbelievable. When he was on his game, when he was focused, when he was like playing at the top of his level, you couldn't do anything with him.
Nothing. He had like the quickest hands. Like, he's known for his strength, but he had quick hands. He led the league in steals a few times. And he's what, 6'7", 6'8"? Like, that's unheard of. Normally it's a little guy. Yeah, he was incredible. He was just an incredible player. So I think last thing before we go, they thought they were favorites for the title. The San Antonio Spurs won in 7 over the Detroit Pistons in the final. Tell us.
Guess what? Manu should have won that finals MVP, and they gave it to Duncan. Those motherfuckers. They gave it to Duncan because they had to give it to Duncan. Why would you give it to a foreign guy? Huh? Why would you give it to a South American guy? He should have won. Watch the highlights on game 5 and 6. And 7, and you see Manu dominating that game. No. He was the starter in that season. Like, come on. Still pissed off, man.
So how much would the Pacers have beat the Spurs in the final? 6 games? Pacers in 6?
No.
Sure.
No. Spurs in 4.
The Pistons took you to 7, and the Pacers were better. So what are we saying?
I mean, Manu's in jail. Manu's in jail at that point.
I forgot. It's the season where the Suns finish on top in the West, and Steve Nash is MVP, right?
Yeah.
That was the team.
Shaq goes to Miami.
Yeah. And they finish top of the East.
They win the next year, right? Miami wins the next year.
Yeah.
Fun times, man. Fun times. God, good doc. I enjoyed it.
Yeah,
I enjoyed
it 100%.
I've seen a couple of people online that were like, "Oh, it starts amazingly," and then it finished weak. And was like, I didn't have that impression.
I disagree.
I thought it was very well.
It'd be interesting to talk to somebody that doesn't have like the context of like experience it at the time, because I think
that wasn't there. kind of
Or yeah,
wasn't there, right?
yeah, because I think we all sort of knew it and knew how it was
Mhm.
sort of depicted and things, and then as you guys have said, like there's a lot of stuff that you're like, oh, I didn't realize that, like,
Mm.
oh, there
Yeah.
really weren't any police there, and the police that were there were douchebags.
Mm.
Yeah. All very interesting. I'd love to watch it with a non-NBA fan and just see
That's a
how
good point.
they interpret everything,
Mm.
and the backlash that they got at the time. But yeah, thank you for listening. We appreciate each and every one of you. We will be back with another episode at the weekend, hopefully. 3-episode crossover episode.
Hey.
Ooh.
Teaser. But for now, we have been the Grit and Grime Basketball Podcast. I've been David Sago. He's been Thomas Arnold.
No, you've been awesome.
He's been Michael Downey.
Oh, shit.
Night.
And he has been Jose Garcia Fidel.
Tom's an
Bye-bye.
oppressor.
And we are out of here.